You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-commerce strategy, technology and CX-focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gedd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-commerce strategy of leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Inside Commerce podcast, sponsored by WorldPay. I actually recorded this intro before with Jojo, but I decided to re-record it because we ended up talking in quite a lot of detail about Manors' Agentic Storefront, and I felt that I'd maybe not done a good enough job of introducing what an Agentic Storefront is. So I thought I would just very quickly summarize that essentially, Manors have an independent storefront alongside their .com that essentially feels like an LLM, and it's, a dialogue-led experience and more like a chatbot. And essentially you can then be recommended products and then refine. And then there's also a virtual try-on experience. And you can also use voice functionality, which is pretty common for users as well. So I just wanted to make it really clear that that is the experience, essentially. And then now we'll jump into the discussion with Jojo and go from there. Hello, and welcome back to the Inside Commerce podcast, sponsored by WorldPay. It's just me today, as James has been called into a last-minute meeting with a client that I believe is about to go live with a pretty big re-platforming project. So yeah, he'll be back for the next episode. And today we're joined by Jojo, who is the co-founder of Manors Golf, which is a brand that I've personally liked for quite a long time and I've always been super impressed with, particularly from a content perspective, and I'll come on to that in a second. To start with, Jojo, can you give us a bit of an intro to you, maybe your background and Manors as a brand?
Of course. Thanks very much for having me. I've got quite an interesting background from I guess for the relevance of this podcast, in that before Manors, I actually founded a digital marketing agency. So we specialized in web design, development, and social media marketing. And, this is back in kind of 2012, 2013, before, Shopify was as big of a platform, and Wix and Squarespace had taken over the templating. So we built a lot of interesting websites for brands, notably businesses like Castor, which we launched in 2016. And through that process of launching brands, I was always playing a lot of golf and kind of fell in love with the idea of trying to launch a business or brand myself. And we had the initial idea for Manors back in 2018. And from there, just started focusing on that, and ultimately got to a position where I chose to sell my business in the agency world and focus on Manors, which I've been doing now for the past 6-7 years.
Amazing. And the core of this episode will be focused on kind of your Agentic storefront that you've launched and that kind of area generally. But before we get into that, I mentioned a second ago about your content, and I see a lot of brands that we work with, like sometimes, really big brands, talk about the content that you guys create. And when you and I have spoken in the past, you've talked a lot about kind of how you double down on that. Yeah, can you just talk us through, because I guess that's the area that everyone talks about with Manors, like how you've kind of approached that, and also like how the brand's doing generally.
Of course. I guess the big thing that we have as a business is team, and we have an incredible content team. So we actually have more people employed at our business full time for content than we do for product, which is, interesting given that we obviously sell clothes. But that team's led by my co-founder, Luke Davies, and Luke has a background in commercial film. So he actually, he's produced directed short films with Stephen Graham. He has won 2 Young Director Awards at Cannes Lion Film Festival. So Luke, I managed to convince him that it would be a good idea to drop his dream of becoming a famous director to focus on selling golf clothes. And fortunately, he said yes to that. And we've been able to apply his skill set within the creative ideation with our vision, I guess, of how do we use that creative ideation to apply it to sort of social media virality. Those two pieces have been that's kind of our secret weapon there. So combining those two things. And now what you see as an output from us is that we don't spend a lot of money on paid marketing, and we spend a lot of money on original content. And that's how we create and grow our top of funnel. So it's worked very well for us. We're fortunate that we had some very trustworthy or trusting, I should say, investors who backed our vision, and we're now reaping the rewards of that through a really, really good content program that seems to be catching a lot of people's attention.
Great. And maybe later on we'll come on to how that could tie into some of the kind of agentic stuff you guys are working on. But yeah, kind of onto that. So I guess the big question, so obviously agentic is quite new. The Brunello kind of example of an agentic storefront has probably kind of raised awareness of it a bit more in the industry, but it's super new. Can you just talk us through like what made you, as one of the kind of early adopters of Swap also, go down that route with Manors?
Yeah, of course. I think having always been an early adopter, in all forms of technology, this particularly caught my eye. I was someone who was interested in cryptocurrency as early as 2014, 2013. Being in tech beforehand and building, websites and embracing, whether that be, responsive mobile websites in 2012, or even, we were one of the very first, Manors was one of the very first headless Shopify sites to ever launch. That was in 2023. We've always adopted an industry leading standard when it comes to the new technology. And when I first heard about the agentic experience, it was via Swap, who already provided a lot of our peripheral services within e-commerce. So things like Swap returns and international and so on. And yeah, they approached me with this idea about beta testing. And I was immediately intrigued because I'm someone who's, very, very eloquent when it comes to the use of LLMs and have been using them for quite a long time already. So for me, I think that there's a huge amount of potential with harnessing agentic. I think the big opportunity is in finding ways to create points of differentiation so that actually agentic and the experience of agentic can feel almost like you're walking into a company's store. And that means it needs to be dynamic enough to say a Manors store would look very different to a Bruno store, right? Or an Alo store. But we still need to find ways to cater and harness that technology. And that's this journey that we're going through at the moment.
Great. And then the obvious next question is around, I guess, the response to that. And so maybe before we come on to performance, and I saw you put some stats on LinkedIn recently about this, but what has been like the response from your customers? So have you had any kind of feedback? Because obviously it is quite a new experience, and a lot of consumers probably aren't quite there yet in terms of, expecting that commerce and kind of LLM experience together. What's the response been like from people?
Generally, this response has been very good. I know, because we have access to the feedback, I know that people are open-minded to the idea. There's obviously the whole point of beta is that, you're not going to get it right necessarily the first time round on all points. And therefore, there's been some very valuable feedback on how we can optimize. But I think the thing that's most exciting for us is knowing what we do about the feedback on some other businesses who have had a lot more pushback from their customer. We seem to have had the best cohort of positivity from it. Now, is that maybe because we're a business which focuses on selling product to under 35 customers and they're more open-minded? Maybe. But it's also about the way in which we communicate what we're trying to achieve with our customers by saying, this is something new, this is something exciting. We don't have all the answers and it's not going to be perfect and polished, but can you help us test it? So I think I've been really pleased with that reaction.
Great. And maybe again, just before we get onto the kind of numbers, how are you pushing traffic to the storefront at the moment? Like what types of users are you getting into the environment?
So the main focus from a traffic standpoint has just been through our newsletter. So we've got a really good database of customers. As a business, we have a very high returning customer rate. into the 40s, which is very valuable. And it means that we have very carefully segmented from a loyalty standpoint. We, as a business, we don't have a loyalty program. We just have a very carefully considered segmentation within our emails so that we can talk to top customers. And that's what we've done. We've given opportunities to our top customers to get involved. And then as we've decided to roll out and optimize it further, we've opened up the opportunity to a wider range of our customers, although we still never have gone out to the full suite, just the full database just yet.
Ready to grow your business online? With WorldPay e-commerce, you can deliver fast, secure payments your customers love, backed by global reach and real people-powered support. Scale with confidence and enhance your customers' experience with WorldPay e-commerce.
So we were obviously in a session the other day where we were both kind of giving some feedback to Swap, which is where we met. And you were talking about how you could see this evolving for Manors, and we'll come on to that in a second. But do you have any insight into like how people are using it? Because I guess the holy grail is that it's a deeper dialogue and people are able to, I guess, find the perfect product for them or provide more context around where they're playing golf, like conditions, like all of that kind of stuff. And are you finding that people are kind of going down that route? And do you see that as, a source of data for you guys, I guess?
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing that we need to try and solve with Agentic is how we curate for discovery. So I know myself, and having seen also my girlfriend enjoy some online shopping, that sometimes people quite like the idea of discovering via, just utilizing the website. So scrolling through an e-commerce page where you've got a 4x2 grid of products, you're just winding your way through. And I think people are trained into enjoying that experience. And what we're trying to do with Agentic is say, tell me what you're looking for. Just like if someone walked into a shop, you would go in there and go, I'm going away this weekend to Italy, and I would love a couple of pieces that I can wear, one to the beach and the second one will be for dinner one of the evenings. And the shop assistant would help you, right? And the idea being that shop assistant would help you and curate something for you. And the idea is that should therefore create a higher AOV and a higher opportunity to convert, because you might buy 3 products instead of the 1 or the 2 you were potentially going to buy on a website. So what I think we need to try and find a way of creating is that same environment, but we're still not quite there with the Agentic experience because it's very much conversational. I think there's just a lot of interesting work that can be done on the discovery. And it's like, how do we train customers into thinking that it's okay to just go through this process a little bit for the better outcome versus just, flicking through catalog pages until they see something that might catch their eye.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And then I guess on to the data side of things. So I saw your LinkedIn post. I think you talked a bit about returning customers and maybe returns rates as well. But what impact or what are the numbers saying about Agentic?
Yeah, so the numbers have been very positive. The caveat is obviously that this has gone out to our data, our database, right? So these are people that already in some capacity know about us. Now, the database has reached non-customers in terms of we've outreached to non-customers too. So it's not just like only returning. And the really positive thing to see is that the customer rate in terms of who was purchasing on Agentic was actually about 35% new customers. So that's slightly lower than our general .com, but it's great to see that the Agentic experience was the catalyst for someone deciding to purchase with us for the first time. The second point there is on the returns rate. So the returns rate I think the number was 50%, 54% lower on Agentic. Now, a couple of key takeaways there. One, is it because this is a customer generally that's already knows and shops with us, and therefore they're less likely to buy a product which is the wrong size or fit? potentially. But I also think that because they're able to have that curated experience, they're coming across product that they like and they want. And potentially that is the reason why the returns rate was so much lower. And I should caveat that by saying that the return, as in refund rate that we have on our website, is below 8%. It's about 8%, below 9%, which is already very low as an industry standard. And we were seeing 4% or so when it came to returns or refunds requested through the agentic experience.
Do you have a view, because I think you've got the updated VTO experience now, if I'm correct. Do you have a bit of a view? It might be too early to have a view on whether that's impacting it, but also do you see that having an impact in that area?
I see any form of new technology that is being applied as an opportunity to increase conversion, because in my mind, I spent many years doing conversion analysis reports on behalf of e-commerce customers. And now at Manors, we're constantly looking at ways to increase conversion, items per transaction, and basically how we can impact sell-through. So we find when we add any form of technology that is, conducive to optimizing their experience, it helps. It's too early to have exact data on exactly what the VTO is going to do for us, but I think it's a really good step in the right direction. And, what I'm aware of coming down the road with further optimizations is only going to help that.
Yeah, I think I see a lot of business cases from VTO, and I should point out the VTO is virtual try-on for anyone listening, but a lot of business case suggesting that it will like half returns rates. I've never seen one kind of live up to the hype, but I do feel like in this experience, there is a world where, and we obviously talked about this the other day, where it could actually play a bigger part in a more personal experience. So yeah, be interesting to see how that evolves. So the big question for a lot of people listening is going to be like how this actually works from a kind of tech and ops perspective. So I think does it live on .ai or is it ai.manosgolf?
It's ai.manorsgolf.com.
Perfect. So, but essentially separate domain, kind of separate to Shopify. How does it work from an ops perspective in terms of inventory, order management, that kind of stuff?
It basically works as an additional, it's not quite the same as an additional warehouse, but it's like an additional shop front. So it all plugs in very, very natively to Shopify. That's where it's pulling a lot of its data in at the moment. And this is something that I've been keen to push, is what we want as a merchant is more customization options on the back end, so that we can, something that we do a lot on our .com is we optimize from a merchandising standpoint what products show first and what's on the homepage and so on, because you don't want, one best-selling product by sell-through should be on the forefront, but what happens if that best-selling product is out of stock at the moment? You're wasting consumers' time. So that's something that I think definitely is key and in the works. But it's relatively straightforward from a, plug and play perspective. And I think the templating is smart enough to be able to apply to a business like Manors, which has got a plethora of solid content, and also businesses that might not necessarily be as able to invest into, very dynamic product and, model shots. Like there needs to be flexibility to satiate all kinds of, brands and their relevant custom, product libraries.
Yeah, makes sense. And I guess the implementation itself, like how long did it take you start to finish? And was it, did you need any kind of technical resources or anything?
So generally speaking, because we went in at beta, it's probably a longer period than what it would be if someone was going in now. And because we had nothing, we weren't working towards nothing, we were helping put those, I guess, initial foundations in place. But, I think like with anything now, 4 weeks from, hey, this is something we're interested in doing, to pushing out a newsletter to say people can shop, I think that's a realistic expectation. But we also were the cause of some delays during that process, because 6 weeks in, we needed to send stuff and we had a major launch that we were focused on, or, other things were happening. But with a concerted effort, I think that 4-week turnaround would be realistic. And when you think about, gone are the days when a website would take 6 months to build. Like, that is just no longer, it's no longer feasible. So yeah, it's good to see those kind of timelines are shortening.
Great. And so I guess the big next topic, and I think, I found this interesting when we were kind of in that room together. I guess where you are now is obviously super early. You're a real early adopter. Swap is also early. As far as I know, like the only vendor that's really trying to push this area and educate the market and everything else. And right now you're in an experience that is great, but also relatively templated. Where do you see this going? Where do you, not just for Manors actually, where do you think this goes next, and where do you see it kind of ended up?
So again, harking back to my experience from web development in 2012, for me, this is literally the mobile desktop to responsive experience again. It's like, I remember the big buzzword was, we're building mobile first. Like, that's every website was using that kind of sort of slogan. And I feel like we are going to get to a point where people's expectations about when they go on a website and how they explore that are going to evolve. I don't think that that's going to happen in the next 6 months or potentially the next 12 months. But I do think that those that are early in that process are going to have a huge advantage, because the way in which, say, for example, Google would be indexing from an SEO perspective, SEO was such a hot topic. Let's say, it's been a hot topic for a long time, but it was a hotter topic 10 years ago. Now that's coming back, because where do LLMs get their information from? They get it from Google, or they get it from, sources like that. And that's where discussions happen to say, how do we make sure that when someone is searching, I want to know the best 5 coolest golf brands to buy something for my boyfriend, and they're doing that in ChatGPT or in Claude, it comes up with Manors, and then eventually it's shopped via that that outlet. That's what we're trying to get ahead of. And I think by having that agentic storefront, we're going to be at the forefront of the LLM's mind, because we are able to have those conversations already with our customers.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I found quite interesting when we were chatting before, so you've got, from what I gauge, quite a good kind of background around creative and kind of experience, kind of particularly like UX areas. And I guess at the moment, and one thing I probably should have said up front is that essentially this experience, you can chat to it like an LLM. You can also use voice. There's also within the storefront, kind of more merchandised kind of elements. How do you feel this might evolve, more from a visual perspective? Because I think that was something that I felt you had some quite strong views on.
I think that it's probably unrealistic to expect people to go straight down into the LLM style e-commerce experience. Like, there has to be a softer landing. And for me, I feel like that's the opportunity. If we can find a way to make it look like an agentic storefront is this analogy of it opening the door of a shop. We would, if we open up a store, managers spend a lot of money making sure that the experience looked like how our customers would expect. And I think that same thing needs to happen. You can't create a really boxy, boring agentic experience, which is type heavy, and expect that to be something that's sexy. Like, we need to find a way for it to become sexy, but conversion focused, and still feel like it's e-commerce, but different. So it's a really interesting time from a design and a UX standpoint, something that we're, helping and basically giving directions, with our experience to Swap about how we can execute on that and where we think it needs to go. Because right now the bot experience is incredibly good and detailed. But it's like, there's still a lot of UX optimizations that I think we can do. And I'm really excited to see and know what's already in development and get those items pushed.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think my view on it is obviously it's so early, and I think the backbones that Swap have are great and like really impressive. I think that what is built on top of there to allow for people that are landing an experience where they've never seen the brand before, you know, have no idea what product is in the catalog, etc., etc. It's kind of layering all of that on, isn't it? So
100%.
Really interesting. I know Swap have got some good cases they're working on to try and take that to the next level. So I think that'll be really interesting. Final question. So I guess, you know, you're at this point where you've got this storefront, you've got a level of traffic going for it, a level of revenue going for it. What do you intend to do next with it? Is it just a case of, you know, more of the same, or do you plan to do more testing with different types of traffic? Yeah. What's next?
What's next for me is that I want to build out how we can create a more visually striking experience so that, you know, Manors believes that golf's a game to be explored. We sell adventure. We sell golf adventure. And by proxy, we sell golf polos. But it's like, how can I give that kind of energy to our agentic experience? And that will require, you know, some elements of customization that I think we can template, but still with the right content can look good. And going back to this point about it being sexy and it being innovative, that's for me is really important. So there's a few things I'm pushing to have implemented. And at that point, it will give us an opportunity to go back to those same testers or even a wider audience and say, hey guys, we've listened, we've learned, and we've optimized, you know, can you give us another look at this? And I don't think we're far off wanting to start pushing new traffic to it as a source. But I just want to make sure that, like the analogy of the shop again, you know, we're not sending people who have never experienced the brand to a storefront, which might not be our best foot when we know we're very close to executing and delivering on some really exciting and innovative design changes.
Great. Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. I feel that's quite aligned with other people that I've spoken to that are either looking at this or early stages. Yeah, it's just about kind of making sure that you're kind of matching the experience to intent and types of users. That was great. And yeah, really appreciate you coming on. Obviously, I asked you super last minute as well. Yeah, and I think it's been really useful. I think it's good context as I speak to so many people that are like, considering this or have it in their roadmap. And I think Manors is such a good example of a brand doing, you know, all the right things. So I think it's good to hear your perspective. And then, yeah, thanks everyone for listening. As always, please subscribe or like. And then, yeah, like I say, James will be back next time and I'll see you all soon.
You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-com strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.